You know when you read a really fascinating study and you're just like, how did they even come up with that? Well, today, we're going to pull back the curtain. We're not just looking at the flashy findings. We are going to build the entire blueprint for a research study, from that first big idea all the way to the final discovery. So let's get into it. Right? You see all the headlines and the big conclusions, but how do researchers actually get there? It can feel like some kind of secret, super complex process, but it's not. There's a really clear and logical structure behind it all, and we're about to walk through it step by step. Okay, so this is the framework. I know. At first glance, it might look like a crazy wiring diagram or something, but I want you to think of it more like our treasure map for today. We're going to follow it piece by piece, and I promise, by the end, it'll all make perfect sense.
To really understand that map, we need a blueprint. Every single solid research study is built on a framework just like this, one that connects those big, abstract ideas to very specific, concrete actions. It's all about making smart, deliberate choices at every stage.
And here's that framework in a nutshell. I find it helpful to think of it kind of like a funnel. We start at the very top, with the broadest, most foundational beliefs. And then we get more and more specific as we go down until we're talking about the exact tools we're going to use. So let's define what each of these four big terms actually means.
First up, philosophical assumptions. This is often called a researcher's worldview. And honestly, it's the bedrock of the entire study. It's all about the researcher's core beliefs, what they think knowledge is, what they think reality is. This is the why that shapes literally everything else.
Okay, so from that philosophical bedrock, we move on to the research approach. This is the first really big practical choice, and it usually boils down to one of three main paths: qualitative, quantitative, or a blend of the two, which we call mixed methods. Now we're getting even more specific with the research design. So if the approach is the type of building we want to construct, then the design is the detailed floor plan. Are we running an experiment, a case study, an ethnography? This is where the actual strategy for the study starts to take shape.
And finally, we have research methods. These are the tools and materials you use to actually build the thing according to your floor plan. This is the real nitty-gritty stuff, like, are you using surveys? Are you conducting interviews? Running statistical analyses? These are the concrete actions you take to collect and figure out what your data means.
All right, so let's rewind and go back to the very top of that funnel, to the foundation. These philosophical worldviews, they might seem a little abstract, a little out there, but they are, without a doubt, the most critical choice a researcher makes, because they dictate everything, and I mean everything, that follows. Now, there are a lot of different worldviews out there, but they pretty much fall into four major categories. To make this a little easier to get our heads around, let's imagine each one is a different kind of investigator, and each one has a totally unique goal. So, on one side, you have the post-positivist. Let's call them our detective. This researcher believes in an objective reality. Their whole goal is to find causes that lead to effects, to boil complex ideas down into variables they can test, and to see if their theories hold up against cold, hard data. They're looking for clues. On the other side, we have the constructivist, our anthropologist. They believe reality is subjective, that it's constructed through our own unique experiences. So their goal isn't to test a theory, but to understand the complex, rich, varied meanings that people create in their own worlds. They often end up generating a whole new theory from what they find.
Then we have the transformative worldview, our activist. They see research as a political act. Simple as that. Their starting point is always an issue of social justice, or power, or oppression. The goal isn't just to understand the world, it's to use research as a tool to actively change it and empower marginalized groups. And finally, there's the pragmatist, our engineer. The pragmatist, well, they're not tied to any single philosophy. Their focus is all on the problem itself. They just ask, what works? And then they pick whatever combination of approaches, designs, and methods is going to help them solve that real-world problem.
Okay, so once you've figured out your philosophical starting point, the very next decision is the research approach. Let's go back to our blueprint metaphor. This is the moment where you decide what kind of structure you're actually building. Is it a skyscraper? A cozy cabin? What's the plan?
Now, a really common oversimplification you hear is that qualitative is about words and quantitative is about numbers. And while, yeah, that's kind of true, it's much more accurate to see them as two ends of a spectrum. Most research actually has little elements of both, and mixed methods just sits right there in the middle, intentionally mashing them together. So the key takeaway for qualitative research is that it's exploratory. You use it when you need to understand a problem really, really deeply, especially if it's a brand new topic or a group that hasn't been studied much. You're building from specific, detailed observations up to broader, general themes.
Quantitative research, on the other hand, is all about testing. It starts with a theory or a hypothesis, and then it goes out and collects numerical data to see if that theory actually holds up in the real world. The goal here is usually to measure relationships between variables and hopefully generalize the findings to a much larger population.
And this is exactly why mixed methods can be so incredibly powerful. You get to combine the deep exploratory understanding you get from qualitative data with the broad theory-testing power of quantitative data. You really get the best of both worlds, and that gives you a much, much more complete picture of what's going on. Okay, let's keep on building. We've got our foundation, that's the worldview. We've got our building type, that's the approach. Now we need the actual floor plan and the tools to get the job done. So that brings us to research design and methods.
So this slide lays out some of the different floor plans you can choose from for each approach. For instance, if you're taking a quantitative approach, you might pick an experimental design. If you're going qualitative, you might do an ethnography or a case study. And for mixed methods, you could use something called a sequential design, where one phase of the study actually informs what you do in the next phase. Each one of these is a totally distinct strategic choice.
And here's the toolbox for each of those designs. A quantitative experiment? That's going to use tools like structured surveys and statistical analysis. A qualitative ethnography? You'll be using tools like open-ended interviews and just observation. Mixed methods? You guessed it, just pulls tools from both toolkits. The key here is that the tool always has to match the job you're trying to do.
So we have officially walked through all the individual components. Now let's put it all together and see how a researcher actually assembles their complete, finished blueprint, from the very beginning to the very end.
This is where you can really see it all click into place. Let's just trace one single path. Look at the qualitative column there. If a researcher starts with that constructivist worldview, remember our anthropologist, they're probably going to choose an ethnography design to understand a group's shared experience. So what are the tools for that job? Well, open-ended interviews and observation, of course. See how each choice just flows so logically from the one before it? It's a chain reaction.
So how do you actually pick a path? It's definitely not arbitrary. It really comes down to three main things. First, the nature of the research problem itself. What are you trying to figure out? Second, the researcher's own background and skills. What are they good at? And finally, who is the audience you're trying to reach with your findings?
So, there you have it. It's not some secret formula, is it? It's a series of deliberate, logical, interconnected choices. It's a blueprint that anyone can learn to read and, more importantly, to use. So the only real question left is, now that you have the blueprint in hand, what will you set out to build and discover?